Hi, I'm Jennet Ingle. I am the happiest musician, and I want you to be too. That is why I do these happiest musician minisodes. I am so passionate about wanting creative people to thrive in the world and to be seen thriving in the world. So if you're watching this on YouTube, of course, make sure you click subscribe so that you always know when I drop a new episode, and so it's easier for other people to find my channel. And of course, if you're listening to this in your podcast app of choice, make sure you're subscribed to Crushing Classical. I got an offer recently for a performing job, a gig, and the pay was just not right. It was a little too low. It was the kind of number that made me go, I could say yes to this. And it's the kind of number that if I did say yes to it, and then anybody else offered me anything else that, conflicted with it, I would feel like garbage for having accepted this low paying job. And I bet you have had this experience as well, especially as we move toward the holiday season. There's a lot of work out there that is not normal work, right? Orchestras, if you're working for orchestras, have a set amount that they pay their players and that they pay their subs. But church gigs sometimes are a little goofy. Local choruses are sometimes a little goofy. They're just not accustomed to hiring professional musicians. They're accustomed to working with community members for free. And they don't always know what an appropriate number should be. And of course, they don't always have an extravagant budget for musicians. And I think about this a couple of ways. Of course, I think about it from my own perspective, because I don't want to be the one who has to call them, who chooses to call them later in the season and say, oh, you know that thing I agreed to? Now I'm going to duck out and not do it. I don't want to be that person. It makes me feel icky inside. I don't want it to be all about the money, right? Like if the offer on the table is interesting repertoire, is lovely people that I like working with, that's one thing. I can agree to accept any fee I want for whatever reason I want. But also, work is work. Also, this is how I actually make my living. Also, what I bring to the table as a professional musician is a no fuss approach to the repertoire at hand. When I get there, when I sit down in the chair, I am not going to be the problem that this music director encounters in that gig. I'm going to be the one who is there on time. I'm going to be the one who knows the music or can read it effortlessly. I'm going to be the one who understands what his perhaps untrained conducting gestures are saying. I'm going to be the one who is not a problem and who can even in some situations help. Like I'm a leader among musicians. And I am confident that I can be that person. And that is what you get when you pay for a professional musician to show up and be a ringer in your small orchestra, to show up and accompany your choir. So I am familiar with the value I bring to the table, and I selfishly don't want to be the person who is kicking myself later for accepting a job like this. I am also aware that I am a person with enough privilege to push back on a number that is too low. Because A, I don't really care that much if I don't end up getting the gig, right? I'll just have a free weekend instead, and probably something else will come and fill in. Because B, I am in a position where there are not a lot of me around, right? I am the principal oboist in this town. A job in this town is likely to go to the principal oboist, and there are not that many other oboists around. I'm not really worried about losing my status or my position in this community if I push back a little bit. And I think it's my job as the person with this privilege to push back on the record and to push back for those members of my musical community that might not share this privilege, that might really need the work at whatever fee is being offered. And so I wanted to just tell the story of how I did this, how I negotiated, how I talked to the music director, because the story goes great, actually. The person that I was speaking with was incredibly open to the conversation, was very understanding about it, and was willing to listen and hear. I think the actual language that I used when I responded to the hiring email was, I am free on those dates. This project sounds exciting, but I noticed that the money is a little low. I would be much more comfortable with this number. Is that possible in your budget? And I would like to say that in a different situation, where I just didn't want the work, or in a different situation where I didn't feel that I had the standing to push back on money, I might have just said, no, I'm so sorry, I'm not available. And I've done that before, where in situations where I didn't want to appear grabby about the money, where I didn't want to burn a bridge with a new person that I had not worked with before, where I was in a newer community and not really sure what the rules were, and where I was younger in my career and really trying to get work and show up and be seen playing. So again, I understand that this is not always possible. But it felt important to me to name that the money was the problem, because I wanted my fellow musicians to also be compensated, or to also feel like this barrier had been broken. And so I said it. The music director got back to me a few days later. Like I wasn't like tapping my fingers nervously on the table waiting for an email, but it did take a few days. And he came back with an offer that was higher than previously and not quite what I had asked, and explained that it had been a while since they had looked at their numbers, mentioned that they had originally pegged their compensation numbers based on a few different ensembles in the area, and asked what would be more appropriate. Now, I could not have asked for a better response to the email I sent. It was so open, it welcomed the conversation. And so I felt very comfortable saying, well, the two organizations that you are pointing out as your pins for this rate are not actually equivalent. One is really not a professional ensemble, and here are the gigs that I think you should be looking at instead. Again, I felt confident doing that because he was so open to it. And I did end up accepting the job. It is the case that 3 days later I was offered a different gig for that same weekend that conflicted, that did pay more. And I didn't feel that bad about it because I had gotten the number that I needed out of this gig. And I didn't have to go back and say, okay, you remember I said I was going to do it, but now I'm not going to do it. And I didn't have to go like gritting my teeth to this gig, feeling like I was being underpaid, feeling resentful, feeling angry. I have another story on this too. I frequently hire musicians to come in and be guest teachers for my own program, for my flow program. And I pay them a certain amount of money. And everyone that I ask has said yes, which was wonderful. But a while back, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I reached out to a musician who I really wanted to have come and teach for us. I was really impressed with his work. I really liked what he was doing. And he named a number that was higher than what I had been paying and was very sweet about it. Said specifically, you may not be, you may not have expected me to name a number this high, but this is what I have found to work for me. And I said, great, no problem. I paid it. And from then on, that is the number I offered because A, I have the money, I have the funds to do that. But B, I don't want to be a part of the system that perpetrates paying the lowest possible amount of money that is acceptable to a creative individual, to someone who I respect enough to ask them to come in and teach my group. I don't want to be a person who pays the same amount all the time, except for the one person who is ballsy enough to ask for more. I want to be the person who says, oh, is this the rate? This is the rate that one ballsy person asked for. So now I will put other people at that rate in hopes that more musicians begin to expect this higher rate, in hopes that more musicians feel confident advocating for themselves and saying what they actually need to make a gig work. For you, it is likely that sometime during this holiday season or during this next year or so, if you are a performing musician, it is likely that you will receive an offer that is lower than your normal standard. And you are allowed to think about that and to have feelings about that. Things to think about might be, is this an established orchestra with a contract, in which case there's probably nothing you can really do about that fee. You can take it or you can leave it. But it's still worth letting them know. It is still worth saying if this is the case. I would love to play for you. This program sounds exciting. And the pay is really just too low for me. I'm so sorry. Because there are orchestras out there that have a CBA, that have a contract, and are not really a fully professional orchestra. And if you are not in that tier anymore, or if for whatever reason it's too far away, the mileage compensation isn't sufficient, and you are in a position where you don't need the money badly, it is worth saying so. It's worth saying so because maybe, even if the personnel manager who is trying to hire you doesn't have control over the budget, which is very likely, that person who is trying to hire you does have the ear of the higher ups. And if people begin to turn their job down because it doesn't pay enough, that information will go up the ladder. And then the people get to decide, do they want quality musicians? Do they want professionals? Or do they want to keep their rate as low as possible? It is worth thinking. Can I afford to lose this gig if I push back? It is worth thinking, who am I to this organization? Am I someone that they really want, or am I just a warm body to fill a seat? In other words, it may or may not be possible for you to push back. But if it is, why not do so? Why not open that conversation? Because by openly talking about the money, by openly saying professional musicians are working a job and creative work is work, and this is what the level of compensation should be, like, that gets us somewhere. Eventually, over time, this maybe moves the needle. Can the organization always meet your needs? No. And can you still accept the job? Sure. Like, you are in charge of your own portfolio career, and you can say yes and you can say no for whatever reason you want to. I would just like to normalize that talking about the money is okay, that asking for what you need is okay, and that Your artistry matters. This has been a Happiest Musician Minisode. I release these episodes every other week. It is my pleasure to do so. And I would love to hear what you thought of this. You can send me an email from my website, which is jennetingle.com. You can DM me on the Instagram or the Facebook, and occasionally I even pay attention to those DMs. You can leave a comment below this YouTube video, or you can leave a review for the podcast Crushing Classical itself. And regardless, I hope that this has been helpful, and I want you to have a wonderful day.